Hello, everyone. My name is Angelica, and I am here for your second design workshop from Creative Careers Leadership Lab, presented by Artworks LA. I am a teaching artist for Artworks LA, and I've also done many different kinds of artwork, including graphic design and layout design. So I love digital art, and I'm going to be very, very happy to present to you some of the tricks of the trade or some ideas that you might be able to use in the project that we laid out for you last time. So if you might recall, last time we were talking about brainstorming and putting together some of those ideas that we had for creating a movie poster. And you might recall that this was going to be about your life. It was going to be personal to you or your community if you are working in a group project setting. So our agenda of today is going to be creating that working draft from the brainstorm. Our agenda is going to be gathering images, and mainly we're just going to be using a lot of free images. We'll be doing some basic photo editing, some cropping, masking, just some real quick tricks of the trade that you can use for putting together your layout. We'll be talking about color editing, and especially color theory and color schemes, color palettes, basically like the language that we use with color to convey meaning or gather interest in a viewer. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about alternative designs as well. So just to remind you, the challenge requirements for the project will be can be submitted in February. Because it is a movie poster, there's going to be a certain format that you want to fill, 2 to 3 format. You could do like a 40 by 60, or you could even just do an 11 by 14, depending on what program you're using. You can find out like what kind of templates that they have that you can use. The final submission will be as either a PNG or a JPEG file. And then all work must be original. And I'm actually going to go through a lot through that today about what licensing means and licensed characters. It's got to be school appropriate. So make sure you're talking to your teacher about what that means. And if there are any extra requirements your school might have about what they'd like to see. And we have a full evaluation rubric that should be available to you to see how the projects will be scored, so you can see how you can get the maximum points for this challenge. So we're going to get started with gathering images. So we'll start off with telling a story with images. And then I'll talk about where to find images. And we'll talk a little bit about importing and saving images, making sure you got the right file size, file type. So I'm going to stop sharing right now so that I can head to my mural board, which I introduced you to last time. It's just a nice way to organize your thoughts. Here we go. It's just a nice way to collaborate as well if you are working with a group. So what I had asked last time was to think about the 3 things that your poster needs, the 3 bits of information that you need to have on that movie poster to sort of sell the movie, right? Because this is ultimately an advertisement. So what you want the viewer of that poster to understand is the genre of the movie, the setting, and the title of the movie. So that's usually what you see on a movie poster. Genre is a word that we use to describe like the kind of movie, the type of movie it is. So genre could be a comedy, action movie, romance. Those are all genres. Horror. Those are all genres of movies. The setting means where is that movie going to mainly take place, right? So the setting of Star Wars was space, or the setting of, say, Indiana Jones will be, I think the first one was taking place in, what was the first one taking place in? It was taking place in the Middle East. And then, of course, you need a title. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of like brainstorming you could do to get all those ideas out there. So what I did was just to use myself as the example here. So I thought about my genre. If my life were a movie, what type of movie would it be? Well, I've had drama, hasn't anybody? I've had comedy in my life, hasn't anybody? And I thought maybe, coming of age sounds good because I'm grown now, but I had to go through growing up to get here. So coming of age sounds like a good one too. So I was thinking of that. That's a genre. You could think of it as a genre as well. There's a lot of great coming of age movies that you could think about. Then I thought about the setting. Where are some places in my life that have special meaning to me? Well, LA, LA County is where I lived most of my life. Has a lot of meaning to me. Mexico has a lot of meaning to me because that's where my family is from. So I've had a lot of really important events in my life happen when I was visiting over there. And then I thought more specifically about like a very specific location. I just put the beach. There's actually a few beaches I have in mind, but I've always sort of had a special connection to the ocean and the beach. So I was thinking about that as well when I was thinking of like settings that just, have that meaning to me. And then for a title, you might have a title in mind already, but just a great way, like a great prompt to get you thinking about a title is to just think of a line from a poem or a song. So I was thinking of like all the songs I love, and I was thinking of songs that, have on every playlist, or just the ones that I just turn to when I need to hear something that get through something. So I have, it could all be so simple. That's the opening line from a Lauryn Hill song. That's really, really good. It's called X Factor. And then I was thinking of a Beatles song because I love the Beatles too. So there's a line from the song called Two of Us called Longer Than the Road. It was long. You and I have memories longer than the road that stretches out ahead. And then what else did I put here? Just like everybody else does. Oh, that's a line from a Smiths song. I love the Smiths. So that's a line from How Soon Is Now. It's I'm human and I need to be loved just like everybody else does. I thought that was a great line. So a lot of your favorite movies might actually have titles that are based on lines from poems or songs. So that could be a good way to kind of pull ideas. You could maybe just rearrange them. And if you're not taking the title of the song, it's not too specific. It could actually, a lot of times it's not something you have to really worry about with like copyright or anything like that. So I like the song, I like Longer Than the Road. I think I might go with that one. And that could actually influence my setting because I've been on a lot of road trips. So maybe I'll think of a road, and maybe the coming of age. Maybe I'll pick that from my genre. So let's go ahead and go to what we're going to do with what we're going to do with that information and how we can look for those images that we need. So there are a lot of places where you can find images, but it's really important that you are finding images that you don't have to pay for. In my opinion, you could pay for images if you want to, but also images where the artist or the photographer has given permission. So coming back to the slideshow, a Google search is probably going to be your first place to look, right? So when you're doing a Google search, if you go to the tools bar, you will actually find a really efficient way to look up the usage rights, or to set Google up so that it's only giving you the images that have usage rights that you want. So if you were to click on tools and then you click on usage rights, you can set all the images that shown to you to be to have Creative Commons licenses. So Creative Commons is a way that, we'll just say photographers, for our point of view, photographers can share their works freely to you, and they're getting credited, or they give it to you in a way that that they are allowing, that they like agree to all the rules. So they still hold the copyright for it, but they're letting you use it. And there's a few different other ways that you can get images. Commercial license can be one way. So that means that you would be paying for it. So if you were to use a stock image gallery, like, I don't know, like Getty Images or something like that, you would just pay for it. And that would be the way that you would legally use that image. Then there's also public domain, which are images with no current copyright. There's a whole, I could go on and on and on about intellectual property law, and I'm not going to. But public domain means that usually it's a very old image, and whoever took it has long passed on and it's sort of shared in the public domain. One thing you really want to avoid is using licensed characters such as Mickey Mouse. So please, please, please make sure that even if it's a photograph of a Mickey Mouse doll, you really should avoid using that character, even if someone else took the photo or even if you took the photo. So you will recognize Creative Commons by seeing the CC logo. So we can check for license details by you setting your Google tools to look for the usage rights. So when you click on what we call the thumbnail of the image, you will see on the bottom, like underneath the title of the image, you'll see license details. And you could click on that and that will actually tell you, what exactly the author of that image or the photographer of that image is allowing you to do. So they might say, go ahead, use it. I don't care. You have to credit me. Or they might be saying, use it, but don't edit it. Or they might be saying, use it any way you want, but just make sure I'm credited for it. So when you click on that license details, it leads you to a page where it tells you exactly what you can do with that image. All right. So another thing to keep in mind when you are going to Google Images and when you are clicking on that tools option, you'll also see the size come up. And you want to set the size to large. You want this to be a high quality image because even if it looks good on your screen, once you start to zoom in on it, you see a lot of pixels, and those are those squares that make up the larger image, right? Or you might, and that's going to affect the quality because once this gets printed out, if you can imagine this being printed out for like a large movie poster, say it gets printed out to be on a bus stop, you don't want to see all those pixels. You want this to be a nice, clear image. So just set it to large. And that ensures a high resolution image. And you can ask your teacher a little bit more about what kind of resolution would be the best or the pixel size. Some are so huge that it might actually slow down your computer to work with them a little bit. So just be careful about that. You might want to try and figure out for yourself, like what is the best image. But I would say try to go for at least like the larger number. It'll show you how many pixels. Try to go for at least like the larger number being over 1,000. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and go to photo editing from this point. Or actually, wait, let's go ahead, stop sharing, and I'm going to show you. Let's go ahead and discover the world of Google Images ourselves so that we can gather some images together. Now, as I said, there are many places to gather images. I'm just showing you kind of the default way to do it, right? All right. Head to Google Images, yeah. So I was thinking, let's go back to what I was talking about with the my brainstorm. So I was thinking about the road, I was thinking about, traveling and all the things in my life I want to talk about. So maybe I'll just look up road. So what do I want to do? I want to go to tools. I want to go to usage rights. I want to go to Creative Commons license. Am I done? No. I want to go to size. I want to go to large. Cool. All right. We got some roads to look at. Any road you want. So now I'm thinking of, okay, like a good image that I could use for, ooh, that's a nice one. For a movie poster. Maybe this one right here, road trip images. So oops. Took me where I didn't want to go. I'll click on the thumbnail here, the picture itself, basically the smaller version of the picture, and I'll click on license details. And that should take me to, I hope you can see this screen. It's taking me to exactly where I could see it says there's no copyright for that image, which means I don't have to even credit anybody. Wow, cool. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll save this image. for to gather for my poster. So I'm going to right click on the image. I'm clicking on the right side of my mouse or my mouse pad. And I'll just go ahead and go to save image as. And that will save it. I'll look for it later. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So let's go ahead and see what we could do with this image now. We're going to edit it, right? So let me give you a few tools of the trade for what we do with edited images. Now, aligning, when you look at an image, you can actually think about what you want to be the focus of the image. For example, in this image of some sort of canine, a wolf or a dog, looking at an iceberg, what do we want the viewer to actually see here? And there's a simple kind of rule of thumb to how you can crop it, which is called rule of thirds, that sort of leads the eye of the viewer to what the focal point is, which if we want the focal point to be the dog, then what we would do is we would overlay a grid onto the image, and we would see, and it would be a 3x3 grid, so 9 rectangles there. And we would put the focal point, align it to about one of the intersections of that grid. All right. And this is actually based on the golden ratio, which is about, it's not exactly 2/3, but it's a similar number that artists and philosophers and mathematicians in classical Western tradition had kind of determined was the ideal number, like this magic number. So I guess since we're kind of so used to seeing art that is coming out of a Western tradition, we kind of maybe like to see this ratio being followed, and maybe we just like seeing things around that 2/3 line. There's a lot of things you can discuss with your teacher about why we like this, why artists are so commonly use the rule of thirds. But just be aware of this. There are many, many other ways to compose an image, because this is called composition, besides rule of thirds. You could have something be centrally located. You could have it be very symmetrical. This is not the only way to edit a photo, but I just want to make you aware of this, because sometimes if you're having some difficulties, this could be like a good kind of backup situation. So let's go ahead and take a look at at Pixlr E and see how we can edit some photos, and also see how we could start to combine some images to make an interesting composition or layout for our poster. Some of you might have Photoshop or Adobe and programs like that. If you don't, I'm going to introduce you to Pixlr, which is a really cool free program. It's nothing that you actually have to download onto your computer. It's a website, it's cloud-based, so it actually will save some of your work up to a certain limit, although you should always back up your work. So that is going to be pixlr.com. So I'll go ahead and head to that website. And share my screen again. All right, let's actually go all the way to Pixlr homepage. So that's pixlr.com right there. If you are very, very new to using any kind of software or any kind of photo editing software, you could use Pixlr X. It's very similar to maybe some of the photo apps you might have on your phone. Pixlr E, however, is really cool because it's very, very similar to Photoshop. It has a very similar layout to Photoshop. So if you've never used Photoshop before, this is actually a great way to get you used to those tools that you will see in Pixlr E that you'll see in Photoshop again. But I think what I'll do is I'll start with Pixlr X for right now, just to kind of get you used to how it looks, and then we'll do a little bit more editing on Pixlr E. So this is how you're going to open an image on Pixlr X, because remember I saved it. what do you think I'm going to click? Open image, right? So I saved it. Where was it? Let's go to my recents. I also paid attention to the file type, which was JPEG. You want to make sure that it's either a JPEG or a PNG. I'll go a little bit more into file types as well, but you might have to end up converting like a different file type. Sometimes you also might get it just going to a web page, in which case you probably shouldn't use it, or maybe you weren't using the usage rights properly. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at a few things that we could do with this. Well, obviously, we need to crop it to the right size. So we could just go ahead and start looking at that cropping tool. And look at what happens, everybody. Once I start cropping it, it's by default, I get that 3x3 grid. It's right there. It just wants you to do rule of thirds. It just does. So what I can do with an image like this, where the focal point is kind of more centrally located, if I wanted to keep it centrally located, that's fine. But what I can do is I can actually move the horizon line to 1/3 or 2/3 of the way. What that means, what do you think I mean by horizon line, by the way? What do you think I mean? Have you ever heard that term before? It's where the sky meets the land in a landscape painting. And I'm sure you're probably thinking that the horizon line is the cloud, like the clouds, and then the mountains over here. But it's actually this line right here, which is where the kind of foreground or middle ground plane meets the sky. So that would actually be our horizon line. So I could probably put it there. Also, the width and height are adjustable here. So I can adjust the aspect ratio, or I could select an aspect ratio here as well. So I could go ahead and try to find a good aspect ratio for our image here. Oh, look at that. It gives with all these defaults for social media too. That's neat. Let's see what I would like. Some of these are landscapes, so I gotta kind of find one that's that's a good one right there, but I want to switch to width and height. So I'm just going to manually go ahead and change this one to 800. And I'll change this one to 1200. Oh, okay. I got to clear it actually to do that. Okay, so we got a nice aspect ratio, almost. Height is 1200. I got to make it smaller. It looks like there it is. Looks like that might not have been the right size there. But you just click enter on your keyboard once you kind of have it the way you want. And then what I'll actually end up doing with this is I might want to edit this later on in Pixlr E instead. So I would actually just save this as either a JPEG or a PNG, probably a PNG image. And so that would just be clicking on the save button there. And then and you don't have to click on transparency, but I'll get into that later. Or if you're going to work on it later, you can save it as a PXZ file, and that saves it as a project. It's not an image file, it's just a project. So if you did some editing, but you want to be able to undo that later, then you would save it as a PXZ. I would save it as both. But since for the most part I'm done, I'll just go ahead and save it as a PNG. And I'll put it somewhere. I'll just rename it poster background or something like that. And you want to, of course, make sure you're saving all of this in like a nice little file somewhere. Okay, stop sharing. Let's go ahead and go back a little bit so that I can now pick Pixlr E. So Pixlr E, like I said, it's a little bit more like Photoshop. If you were already working on Pixlr, it actually saves a lot of what you did as a cache. You could find it in your latest projects. If you don't see it, then obviously you saved it, right? So you would just go to open image to open it. I'll probably fix the cropping on this a little bit later, but I want to show you how we can combine some images on Pixlr. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to Pixlr stock images this time to find an image that I like. So if you're using Pixlr and you couldn't really find anything that you liked on Google, Pixlr stock images are free license as well that you could go ahead and use those images without paying, and it gives you the author's name so you can continue to credit it when you are making your final poster. So if I were to go ahead and head to, well, I could head home and I could head to search for images, or I could head to file new image or stock image here, stock search. And one of the things that I was kind of thinking is, if you recall the requirements for the images that we want to gather, we wanted a setting and we wanted a character, a main character, something like that. Now, you might have some main characters in mind, you might have some actors in mind, and you got to kind of look into whether or not you're allowed to use those images. A lot of images of famous actors are images that are licensed that you have to pay for. I would prefer that you take images yourself. If you can, maybe you have someone that could be a model for you, or you find images of just what we call stock image models, and there's plenty of them in Pixlr E. So these are kind of unknown people. I'm going to use a silhouette image just to be on the very, very, very safe side. So this is going to be where a silhouette's where you just have a black outline. It's like a shadow or the person's backlit. So, oops, I misspelled silhouette. Silhouette. I know I entered it before. This is what a silhouette is, right? And a lot of movie posters have silhouettes in them. You could probably think of a few. So let's find an image of a silhouette that I'd like to use. Maybe just like a lone figure walking on the road. Or a couple of lone figures. And if you scroll down, you can actually go to load more. If you still don't like anything, you can still keep going and looking and looking and looking until you find something you like. And I like this one. And there's the author or the photographer, so you can credit them later. And I'll click that. And what I'm going to do is, because it's a very large image, what it can do is it can resize the image for me to make it kind of more of like a medium size, that I could work with it without slowing down my computer too much. So full HD is a perfectly fine setting for this if you're using Pixlr 8. You could work with original if you have a really fast computer, but full HD, it's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. Okay, what I want to do is I want to take just a silhouette here, and I want to cut out the background. So if you are working with Pixlr, there's a very cool tool here. It's called the cutout tool or the mask tool. It's these scissors right here. So I'm going to go and click that. Because the silhouette is pretty uniformly black, I can use the magic tool, which is a tool that selects pixels by color. And that is this tool right here, Magic Mask. So I'm going to click an area here that is just a black pixel. And what it'll do is it'll select all the other black pixels that are available that are connected to where I clicked. I want to make sure my mode is set to add to mask, because I want to keep that. Otherwise, if I were trying to get rid of all the black pixels, I would click remove. So I'll click add to mask, and I'm just going to click right here. And boom, there I go. That was that easy to remove the background there. Some images are a little trickier. One thing you might want to do instead, there's a cool draw tool here, a draw mask. So you can maybe just like an eraser tool, just kind of cut away everything, but that will take time, but it's an option. There's also a lasso mask, which is you kind of just draw around the area that you want to cut out or remove. This will also take some time. I'm actually just going to cut out this whole sky. So this dotted line right here is the lasso. What you could do with this is you could cut out like a huge area just to get it out of the way and then go back in with the draw tool and clean it up. So that's an option. And then there's also a shape mask, which you could pick a cool shape, like a circle, and that will, maybe you want that for your image. Maybe you want it to be in a shape. So that's just an option for you. I'm going to go back to the magic mask and do it the easy way for what I selected. All right, so now what I can do is I can combine these images, and I can do that by taking this image, which has this lovely name on it, and I could drag this or I could drag from here, right here, actually, where it says a background image. This is a layer. I'll get into layers in a moment, but I can drag this and I can drag it to the background, which is right here. So I have like two images open. So I'm going to take the layer and I'm just going to drag it to this other image like this. All right. And I'm going to zoom out. I can zoom out right here. It looks like this image might have actually been too big, but that's okay. We can resize it. I'm going to click on this arrow right here, and you see how this blue rectangle came out. So I'm going to zoom out even more just to see the whole thing. And I'm going to click on these white squares. There we go. And I'm going to drag it, click and drag to make it smaller. And now I'm going to zoom in again. And I can, as long as I'm using this tool, the arrange tool, that arrow tool, I can go ahead and still move this around. And I can figure out, like, if I want them to be, like, maybe I want this line right here to be where the other third was of our rule of thirds. Maybe I want it centrally located. I'm also thinking about where I want the text to be right now, which I haven't gotten into it, but of course this is going to have text. So maybe movie titles usually look better on the bottom. So this would be a great space right here to add the movie title. I kind of feel like with the size of these figures, I want them a little bit on the left. So these are all compositional decisions that you can make, that you can play around with. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the principles of design and how they're used in layout design, how to move around objects so that they are of interest to the viewer and that they make sense to the viewer. So you could think about things like balance and unity, and you could think about design principles like repetition and so forth. These are all things that you can kind of look into for yourself, because it's way too much for me to go into right now with the limited time I have left. So I'm just going to kind of play around with a little bit with what kind of makes it look good to me. It's okay if you kind of understand or figure out for yourself like what looks good to you. Just for now, I mean, there's a whole future ahead of you to think about design as it looks good to, your customers or your clients, right? But for right now, I'm just going to kind of leave it here. I kind of like it. And I'll just click enter on my keyboard. Just leave it there. That's not working. Well, I'm just going to click outside of the box, leave it there. Okay, something very, very, very important happened. On your right, you'll see where it says layers. And what happened was when I added this extra image, it turned into a different layer. There's the background image is the layer. Well, this also says background. We could ignore that. We could see which one it is by the thumbnail. And then the silhouette is a layer. And what's cool is you can actually rearrange layers. You can click on a layer and drag it around. And now the background image is on top. And you can even see the silhouette. I can put it back. I can click on this little eyeball tool and make that layer go away if I don't want to see it. And I can click on it again. See this lock tool right here? That means this image is just the background and I can't edit it anymore, but I could just click on that and make it so that I could still move it around. I'm going to use that lock tool again though, because what that means is that I won't accidentally move it around. You could right click on a layer to access like all the layer settings. So I'll go ahead and lock it. Look at all you can do. You can even change the opacity and make it see-through. All kinds of cool stuff. Okay. I'm going to go ahead. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. I thought my head was disappearing there. I'm very blind, so I have to like look in a lot. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my slides and we're going to talk about the beautiful world of color editing. A couple of things I'm going to talk about here is basic color theory, very basic color theory, because you could take a whole class on that and you usually have to when you're in art school, and a few of the editing tools we can use in Pixlr X, which are very, very similar. I'm sorry, Pixlr E, which are very similar to what you can use in Photoshop. So maybe you've seen this before, the color wheel. The color wheel is such an important tool for artists. This is a very basic color wheel. There's actually many different kinds of color wheels, but this is like the basic one where you start to use and start to understand the relations between colors and color mixing. So a few things just to think of your color wheel review. If you want to do this in class, try to name a primary color, name a secondary color, and name a tertiary color. And let's see who knows that in your class. And obviously the primary colors are kind of revealed there for you in my example. But if you know those others, you're on a great start. Color palettes or color schemes are ways that you can arrange colors to have what we would call unity or uniformity, or no, we would call it unity in design. There would be maybe only about 4 or 5 colors that you would really pick from when you're designing a poster that you really want to focus on. But the main kind of default way that you could really understand relations between colors and come up with a color scheme or a color palette is to think of complementary colors. These are the colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. All right, blue and orange, red and green, yellow and purple. Because they're opposite each other, they make each other stand out more. They provide what we call more contrast, just like black and white make each other stand out more. So they're very eye-catching. And keep in mind, this is a movie poster. And if we're thinking about this as like you're designing a real movie poster, you want this on a wall in the movie theater, and you want the people coming out of the movie, or getting their popcorn, you want them to stop and look at it. There is some thought you have to give to how eye-catching something is. So let's look at some complementary colors in movie posters. We have red and green, which has been used a lot in movies that maybe are a little eccentric or just have like a different kind of energy, like a little quirky or something like that. So but obviously they've been used in the classic horror movie Dracula here. So you want to also just think about maybe in the movie what colors are used in the movie as well, or what the main character might be wearing. And in the images you're using, you might want to think about like what colors go best with whatever image you gathered. Like, did you get a picture of a person? Are they wearing a certain color clothing? Maybe if they're wearing a red blouse, like Amelie here, maybe you want a green background. So we have the yellow purple combination. This is not used very often, but you could see some great examples here. I think that this has a little bit of chaos to it, maybe even a little bit of danger to it. I kind of like it, especially when it's using birds of prey. Very, very eye-catching. I remember seeing that in movie theater and going like, oh, wow, I'm going to check that out. And the blue-orange, which if you recall, I kind of talked about it last time, is the most common color combination when it comes to movie posters, because what do blue and orange represent? Oh my goodness, it's like cold and hot, right? Fire and ice, passion and not passion or whatever, or passion and coldness or something. I don't know. It's used a lot in action movies, big adventure movies, obviously the big, like, Marvel movies, they're using these, and all kinds of big adventure movies. So many. I know sometimes you see some yellow. Some of the oranges will go into the yellow a little bit, and some of the blues will actually go a little bit into the greens. Remember that color wheel. Blue and green are right next to each other, and yellow and orange are right next to each other. So it's still in that color family. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about color, let's go back to Pixlr E and take a look at a few basic ways that we can edit our image for color. If you are using Photoshop, again, you have more options than Pixlr E. But Pixlr E is a great way to start. Okay, so I mainly want to focus on, because this is a silhouette, I'm actually going to go ahead and hide that for a second. I'm mainly going to focus on the background for a moment. What you could do is you could just kind of mess around with the color settings on Pixlr E to sort of see what you can do for the image itself. But you could also use, where is it here? You could also use what's called a gradient overlay, which is a really cool tool to, it's kind of like a filter. I'm sure you maybe used some filters on programs like Instagram that kind of put a gradient over. And gradient's like 2 or 3 colors or a few colors kind of fading into each other. So I'm going to go ahead and click gradient. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer to put my gradient on it. I don't want to actually put the gradient over this image because it'll just take over the image. I want it to actually just be on top, like literally a filter on top. So I'm going to come right here to this plus sign. I'm going to click, I'm just going to hover my mouse over it, and I'm going to click empty. I just want an empty layer with nothing on it. And I'm going to make sure this layer is active. Don't worry, my background's still there. I just don't have a whole lot of space right there. There's my background image. I'm going to make sure this layer is active because this layer will have, it'll be blue or whatever that comes, aqua. The other layers are gray. Okay, now I'm going to pick a gradient. I'm going to come right here to where it says gradient, and I'm going to just pick some of the presets here. Let's see, maybe I'll pick this nice green. Okay, now you can see my mouse is now an X. I'm going to click and just drag my mouse across the image and just kind of let it go somewhere. And then that determines where the gradient is going to be and where the line is of where it fades from one color to another. And you could, if you don't like that, you could just kind of do it again. And you can kind of just see if you want it like left to right, want it up or down. There's also 2 options. There's linear, which is just like the fade going in one direction. There's also radial, which means it comes like from the center out. So we'll do radial like that. You could tell something alarming may have happened. Our background is gone. Fear not, it is still right there. It's just that this layer is, there's just the gradients just on top of it. So we're going to do a few things to make sure the gradient kind of goes away, not goes away, but is a little more see-through or blends with the layer behind it. So I'm going to click on, I'll just leave it like this, radial. I think that kind of looks cool. I'm going to right click on the layer and I'm going to click on what this setting right here called blend mode. And I'm just going to go through a few of these blend modes, multiply, screen, and I'm just going to kind of play around with like which one I like. They all have, what the blend mode does is it takes that layer and it blends it with the layer underneath it. And these pixels kind of have a certain relationship with each other in the way they're blending, depending on what blend mode you pick. Because I don't have time to go through all of that, I'm literally just going to play around with this until I find something that I find interesting that I like. Play around with it as much as you can. Play around with it and save it a few times. Start making different versions of this right now, different variations. So that way, if you like a couple of them, you can end up just saving them and deciding later on, once you start adding the text and all the other stuff, which one works best for you. All right, so that's your blend mode and that's your gradient. Oh, that's a cool one. That might be for a horror movie. So there's lots of cool things that you could do, obviously, right? You can also go to the actual color settings over here. Let's see, where are they? First, there's a few different ones here. Dodge, burn, sponge color right here. And you could play around with like things like the hue and saturation, which is how intense something is, or the vibrance. This one is cool because this actually lets you change it. I'm going to go back to the original image real quick. This actually lets you change it little by little. Like if you just wanted to do just one area of it, have like, say, for example, a higher saturation. Higher saturation means more intense colors. You can actually just pick one image. Oops, I wasn't on the right layer. There we go. You can just pick one part in the image to make more intense. Do you see that? So a lot of things you could do. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop this and I'm going to go back to my slide deck, because there's one very other important thing you have to think about with color, and that is printing with color. Because ideally, if you're working as a designer and you're making a movie poster, someone's going to print it out and hang it up in a movie theater. So a few things to think about with printing with color is using the CMYK model. So all I told you about color wheels, keep that in your head for a little bit and think about a few other different colors that are used to combine. So remember, like yellow and green, yellow and blue make green, but when it comes to printing, we actually use cyan, magenta, yellow, and black as like the main primary colors. Really, it's just cyan, magenta, and yellow. So cyan and yellow make green. Yellow and magenta make red. And cyan and magenta make blue. And all the colors combined together make black, which we actually use K to symbolize black. That's the older printing term that stands for keep. So you want to make sure that when you're working with whatever program you're going with, it's that set to CMYK. Usually it's already defaulted. The reason why you have to make sure that it's there is because there's also another setting that's very common, which is RGB, which stands for red, green, and blue. And this is how, these are the primary colors of light. And this is how your computer screen is actually showing those colors to you. So the reason why this is important, I'll give you a moment to think about why this is important, and you should pause it and think about this. The reason why it's important is because some colors on your computer monitor can't really be replicated very well in a printer. So you might see a beautiful gradient on your screen, and then you'll get it from the printer and you'll be like, that doesn't look right. That could be because you were looking at it through the RGB and it's just not exactly the same because you were looking at it with the colors represented in light rather than pigment. There are some more, I'm sharing some videos in the slide deck and you can look at them on your own time about what the difference is between RGB and CMYK and why it's important. And I'm also sharing with you a little bit more color theory, including I think there's some color psychology there about like what colors kind of bring out them like different responses from viewers. Oh no, I don't want to play it. There, okay. So just because I'm almost about out of time, I want to remind you that next time I'll be getting into fonts and typography. That will include the required legal text that you have to put into movie posters, such as the credits. We'll talk about some sources that you can find, some free sources for fonts, just like we found free sources for images. We'll talk about font attitudes a little bit, like what kind of fonts kind of have what kind of personalities. And then you don't have to just type something and let it go. There's also all kinds of effects and ways that you can edit fonts to make it stand out, especially in movie poster. I'm going to go ahead and finish this off a little bit with talking about alternative designs, because I feel like I'm making a movie poster that maybe, I'm just going to say it, a little cliche. Cliche means it's just used a lot. Like it's just kind of become kind of played out and basic, right? You don't have to be basic and played out. You can be as creative as you want to, as long as you're meeting those minimum requirements. So I'm going to introduce you to a few artists that I really love. So we'll look at minimalism and we'll look at retro design real quick. So there's a designer called Chungkong, and this designer, what he does is he takes famous movies and he actually looks at the plot and takes the most important parts of the plot and then just makes a very, very simple like outline of that object, like the Harry Potter glasses, like Mike's eye from Monsters University, like the Top Gun plane, and then just puts it in one color. And it's very, very simple, not a lot of colors, just a basic outline. So we call this minimalist design, although it's not as minimal as it should be, but I move on. Very basic font. And so these are, he's not the original designer of these posters. He's just taking very well-known movies and kind of playing with it a little bit. But this is a great resource for you to get some ideas if you want to do minimalism. His Instagram account is Chungkong _art, and his website is chungkongpixels.com. Drew Struzan is a legendary illustrator and designer, and has done the posters for some epic movies that you've probably seen. In not just the movies, but you've seen these posters, usually the Blu-ray covers as well. So he does old school actual paintings and then adding the text over that. So these are paintings, and that is something that I want to bring up because and his Instagram is Drew Struzan art, website drewstruzan.com, because some of you might actually be taking that extra challenge to do analog designing without digital. So what would you do to create a poster without a computer? Would you do collage? That's a cool way to do it. You can maybe find some not movie posters, magazines, and cut out images from magazine. You could go ahead and print out your images and then cut them up. You can do minimalism. You may recall me talking about Saul Bass last time, a great minimalist designer, and you could just cut out construction paper, shapes and construction paper, and see what you can come up with. And if you are already good at painting and drawing, why not go ahead and paint and draw it then? If you're already good at lettering, why not already do your own lettering? If you don't want to do your own lettering, you can paint and draw something and then print out the letters and cut them out and add them. All great ideas. So what are some ways that you could do a movie poster? Is there anything I'm missing? Let me know if you found a really cool way to design a movie poster without going digital. And for that doesn't, that is beyond what I'm sharing right here. I would love to see it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screen. It's been my pleasure to talk about all of this cool stuff with you guys. And I really am looking forward. Once again, next time we're going to talk about type and fonts. And we'll also talk about variation as well, like coming up with different versions of your movie poster. Thank you.